My name is Quinn,
My name is Elliot.
and our project focuses on Two-Spirit activism as well as new policy in U.S. and community-based legislation that puts Two-Spirit people, their healthcare, and community resources first. The problems facing Indigenous communities are direct results of colonization, the genocide, dispossession of land, and complete cultural erasure of spiritual practices, traditional medicine, traditional beliefs, and gender diversity that Indigenous people held.
These activists, organizations, and legislation fight the forced assimilation into the gender binary that was brought to Indigenous communities by colonizers.
The biggest problem facing Indigenous communities right now is that they have the highest rate of missing women and Two-Spirit individuals. There were over 800 reported cases of missing Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people in the state of Wyoming just this year. This is a human rights crisis. It affects all of the Indigenous population. Two-Spirit people, every 2 in 3 Two-Spirit people will be assaulted or face some other kinds of violence or death within their lifetime. As such, all the organizations that we look over today are part of the MMIWG2S movement, which is Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, Girls, and Two-Spirit People. Now we move into Two-Spirit activism. So the Genio Collective is an Indigenous woman and Two-Spirit-led frontline resistance to climate disaster and other environmental disasters that affect Indigenous land. They joined together on Anishinaabe land to stop the destruction by Enbridge Oil Company that was trying to put an oil pipeline through all of Canada and some of the US, obviously all through Indigenous territory. They also rallied to protect a shelter camp for unhoused Indigenous women and Two-Spirit individuals. This camp protects these individuals, provides 24/7 security as well as other resources, as Indigenous communities are 10 times more likely to be assaulted, face violence, or any kind of other discrimination on the streets. This is also a call out to
Depossession.
Thank you, to depossession of land. As these people are not homeless, they have been unhoused, their land has been stolen. Raven Donnell is a young Indigenous activist in Canada who identifies as Two-Spirit and does a lot of their work through community-based programs trying to register people in their communities to vote, which is taboo, as many 2S and Two-Spirit and trans people don't register to vote, fearing that voter ID laws will make it a bureaucratic process if their gender identity doesn't match the one as given on their official records. Raven Donnell also has lots of resources to other young Two-Spirit individuals who are leading movements and leading other activism within Indigenous culture, as well as resistance from the elder generation, such as Elder Mani Shakbi, who gives a deeper insight into the traditional look on Two-Spirit culture and how these people were revered as being very special, spiritually intellectual, and wise, as they housed two energetic bodies within them.
Another activist and educator that we found is Jen Deerenwater. They are a bisexual, Two-Spirit, multiply disabled Cherokee citizen. They are the executive director of Crushing Colonialism, and they are an award-winning journalist and organizer who covers issues their community faces through an intersectional lens. Some of their work focuses on the dehumanization of Native women, the erasure of Indigenous people and chronic illness, Indigenous people's greater risk of COVID-19, and pride's exclusion and capitalization on the genocide of Two-Spirit people.
Most importantly, Deerenwater focuses specifically on how intersectionally they are affected as a Two-Spirit individual as well as being disabled, and calls attention to that in education and healthcare.
One of the only pieces of legislature we could find was a bill in South Dakota that failed. It offered protections for individuals who are LGBTQIA+ and Indigenous Two-Spirit people. This legislation specifically indicates Two-Spirit people, which is the first time the term Two-Spirit was used in official capacity in a state government. Another organization we researched was the Native Justice Coalition. The founder and executive director is Cecilia Rose LaPointe, who identifies as Two-Spirit and is walking a sober road. The Native Justice Coalition's Two-Spirit program that was launched in 2019 engages in decolonizing gender roles and identities within Native communities by honoring the entire gender spectrum in their lives. They do this through healing stories, talking circles, workshops, gatherings, and other forms of community engagement. Two-Spirit talking circles are a culturally supportive and safe space for Two-Spirit LGBTQIA+ and allies. The healing story events are for all Indigenous people, as well as specifically for LGBTQIA+ and Two-Spirit individuals. The healing stories primarily focus on Indigenous experiences of racism they have faced because Native people have been excluded from racial justice in the United States. Some of these events are recorded in the hopes of creating a documentary to spread awareness about Indigenous racism. They also hold private healing story events for individuals who feel too vulnerable sharing their stories on camera. The third organization we researched is the Two-Spirited People of the First Nations. They provide preventative education and support for Two-Spirit people living with or at risk for HIV. They base all their work on Indigenous philosophies of holistic healing and wellness. They provide meal delivery, hygiene kits, phones and internet, and transit passes for Two-Spirit people who are HIV positive.